Welcome back to the next portion of prepping your furniture for paint. This is my friend Trinity. This is one of our English bulldogs. Actually, all of the others have found homes. We had babies last winter, so this is the one that we decided to keep. So we've got to clean it and we've got to prep it, and I get it. So many of the paints out there say no prep needed, don't worry about it, put the paint on there and you're fine. But who wants to rely on that? You don't want to get at the end of your project, put your top coat on, and look over and find bleeding or breaks in the finish, it's crackling, it's coming away because there was some sort of oily residue that you didn't know about. You really just never know what you have whenever we get these pieces of furniture from wherever we get them from. So we're going to be taking a look at what to clean it with and how to clean it. I'm going to talk about a couple of different cleaners that you can use and what are the pluses and minuses of each. We are going to seal it up, and not only the wood itself, but also this fiberboard. Remember, as we were sanding, we had a lot of those fibers start to come loose. We want to tame those guys down so that we have a nice smooth surface that's not riddled with fibrous tissues coming through. So I'm going to show you how to tame those so that you don't have this problem in the future. Alright, so let's get started. Okay, let's get started by taking a look at a couple of different cleaning options. First off, we have TSP. You're going to hear about TSP or even Crud Cutter or Deglosser, things of that nature from a lot of the paint groups that you're in. Great product, aside from the fact that it has to be rinsed off. So generally what you would do, this is the concentrated form, it also comes in a powder form. You would take this and place it inside of a bucket or a squirt bottle, something like that. Make sure you wear your blue gloves or some sort of rubber gloves to protect your hands and your skin. Over time, you don't want it to break down or be in your system, so protect yourself. So it's going to tell you exactly how much to put in for the amount of water that you've got. This is only a concentrated form, and you're going to use that to use a scrubby or a rag, depending on your situation, and you're going to clean everything off. After it's cleaned, dump out your water, get new, clean, fresh water, and begin wiping everything down. You do not want the residue from any sorts of cleaners to be left behind. So, be warned. If you're going to use a cleaner, rinse it away. It doesn't matter what kind of cleaner it is. If it's a cleaner, rinse it off. This is going to stop you from having problems with adhesion, or where you can see that the paint ends up wrinkling and coming together or crackling. It's going to prevent all sorts of different things from happening. So make sure you rinse it off. Next, I'm going to talk to you about white lightning. I don't know why I can't say that word. It's made by Dixie Belle Paint Company. What they have done is taken a look at TSP and the other cleaners that are meant for these kinds of purposes, and they've formulated one in a cute little thing that is perfect for furniture painting. So in other words, it does the job well enough without being overly volatile. So again, this is going to be put into your bucket. I think this is like a gallon-sized apple juice container that I put down. It works for me. And I fill it up about halfway, and I put 1 teaspoon of the stuff in there, mix it up. And again, blue gloves, it's a cleaner, but blue gloves, and I use my scrubby, put it in the cleaner, begin scrubbing away. You don't want to saturate the surface too much, but get it clean. That's the big point. Again, I am going to want to dump this out, get clean fresh water, and I'm going to wipe it down and rinse all of the yuck away. So again, you do have to rinse it off, but it's not as likely to leave that residue behind as especially the powder form of TSP or some of the other like Deglosser type products. So that's Dixie Belle White Lightning. The other thing that I generally do, and I think I just keep this on standby for when I need it, is good old-fashioned homemade cleaner. By taking my water bottle and filling it halfway with water and then filling the rest of it up with vinegar, I'm able to take a couple of drops of dish soap and just drop it in there. This provides a rather natural and very safe cleaner to use that I don't really need to worry about rinsing away either. It's neutralized because the vinegar has lots of cleaning properties. We know about that. So it's just a really good all-purpose kind of cleaner for your furniture. So there you go. I think today I'm going to stick with my mixture because this guy, while he's dusty, there's very little else I have to worry about. The surface was really clean, so I'm just going to use this and keep on going. All right, let's get started cleaning. You can see here I'm taking my homemade cleaner. This is the vinegar and water half and half mix that I've added the dish soap to. I'm going to put it onto my scrubby so that I'm not saturating the surface, especially whenever you have open porous wood like I do here. You don't want to completely saturate it, and therefore the wood or whatever the material is ends up just absorbing all of it. You just want to scrub it down really good, make sure you get any dust, any debris, and of course any residue off of the surface. Next, you want to take a clean rag that's relatively dry, and you want to use that to just wipe everything down. Make sure that there is no residue left behind. Be sure to work in rather small sections. That way you're able to go ahead and clean and then wipe away as you go. If you don't do this, then you risk leaving behind some of that residue, whether it's from the cleaner or the cleaner mixed with the dirt and the grime, the dust, any of that you don't want to have left behind, because if so, then your primer or your paint is going to stick to it and not to your painted surface. Okay, so let's take a look at primer. What kind of primer should you use? By and large, you'll hear me say, don't use water-based primer. For many years, they just didn't do the good job that we need for furniture whenever you're dealing with the oils and such that are inside of the wood and things that can come up through your paint, especially towards the end as you add your top coat. Luckily, the furniture paint manufacturers have heard our pleas, and they began coming out with water-based products that actually do the job of blocking off holders, blocking off stains, stopping that bleed through from coming through. One of those products is Dixie Belle's Boss. We know that General Finishes has a product like that. Wise Owl has come out with their version. Each of them manufacture a white and a clear version. This allows you to go from wood to a white or light color really easily if you are using the white primer. If you use clear, then you're able to distress and still see the wood tone coming through. Dixie Belle's version is called Boss, and the reason for that is because it blocks odors, stains, stops bleed through. So it does all of those things, and is still water-based. They've created the formula specifically so that we can treat it as we would most water-based products and not have the yucky cleanup. But at the same time, it's going to do the job. Rinse as you normally would with gentle soap and water. Make sure you rinse your brush as soon as you're done, because it's trying to do its job. Well, it's going to harden and going to be difficult to get off if you don't go ahead and take care of it. Generally speaking, it's rather quick drying. If you are very interested in making sure that the tannins or the bleed through is stopped, once you do your first coat, let it stay there for a few hours and then come back and do your next coat. Personally, I'll generally go ahead and give it a day. That gives me balance in my life, so I'm not doing too much at once. I come through, do one process, the next day I do the next process. So it works really well for me. On the other side of the spectrum is shellac or oil-based products. Now, oil-based I'm not even going to talk about because who enjoys those? I don't. If you do, maybe you should teach us a little bit more. I am going to, however, move straight over to shellac. Shellac does the same job as oil-based products. However, it's incredibly fast drying and incredibly nice leveling. It is, however, incredibly volatile. This should only be used outside, as well as with the use of a respirator over your face. Not a mask, a respirator. If you don't, you will hate life the next day. You may have a migraine for several days, and who knows the damage that it's doing to your body. So, only outside, use a mask. It comes in spray form. It also comes in a can that you can dip your brush in. It comes in clear, which is actually still a little bit yellow, amber, which is a brownish color, or you can actually get a white pigmented shellac. Sherwin-Williams has an amazing white pigmented shellac that comes in spray can as well as the quarts or gallons. And it's white pigmented, comes in a pinkish, purplish kind of can, and is incredibly fast drying. I love using that on some of my pieces. So again, with those, make sure that you're using a respirator. Make sure you're using it outside. It's going to be fast drying. I wouldn't do no more than 3 coats in a day though. Allow that to sit for the next day before you go onto the paint. You want to make sure it's cured really well before you add any sort of water-based products. And it's, generally speaking, going from oil-based to water-based, make sure that oil-based is completely cured. Depending on the kind of product that you're working with, I can't tell you a time frame before you add the water-based. Otherwise, you are going to trap moisture in between the different layers, and that's going to cause you problems. So, this is also going to help with stopping off the bleed, sealing off any odors, just like the Boss will. It's just a preference of where you're working, what's going to work best for you. Today, my friend is going to be the Boss. That's what I'm going to be working with. The shellac is going to go away, where it has been for quite some time, now that I am able to use water-based products and not have to take the precautions that I normally have to take because it's safer. So, let's get started. Now here you may be able to see where I was previously sanding before doing any of the priming, and you see all of those fibers and the pieces coming up because it's not real wood. This is what we're going to work on taming by using sandpaper as well as our primer to kind of work together. So first things first, I'm going to give it a good stir. Any primer is going to have some solid pieces, not that you should be able to see them, but some heavy substances inside the product that are going to want to settle to the bottom. Make sure you stir it well by not shaking it, but rather grabbing a stir stick of some kind or a spoon and grabbing from the bottom and pulling the product up. This incorporates everything better than just shaking the bottle itself or stirring too vigorously, causing bubbles. Then I begin just applying it liberally across the surface. Something I've noticed about these water-based products are the drying time and their ability to level out. In comparison to oil-based products, oil-based can tend to get really gummy, gooky, and just leave a lot of brush marks and such, and just be very heavy on the surface. Water-based, like the Boss that I have here, is going to level out really nicely and just give us a good even surface to work with. Something to note though are these water-based products are going to be a little bit inferior to shellac or oil-based products. While they are designed to work really well, and most of the time they do, they may not work 1,000% of the time. So be sure to keep like a can of shellac or something on hand to use should a problem come up. Also note how I'm dabbing the primer into the areas you want to really fill in any kind of creases or crevices, and then just smooth out everything with your brush. You want to seal everything as much as you possibly can. You can see my first coat of primer is laid. I haven't done anything with the sandpaper to smooth it out yet. So this is the raw fibers sealed up with the primer alone. Here you can see that I have flexible sandpaper. When I say flexible sandpaper, I mean this vinyl-like material with sandpaper on it. I find mine on Amazon. It's also available in your hardware stores. Currently, I'm using the 220 grit. Earlier, you may have seen that I used an 80 grit on the spindles and such whenever I was doing the initial break and sanding down the finish. But this guy is going to be ultra smooth and ultra flexible, so I'm able to really get into the crevices I need to. Please note too though, I'm using a very, very light hand. I just want to make sure that there's no itty bitty bumps since we're going to be building on this coat with several other coats. So here I'm simply trying to smooth the very top of the surface, not break through anything that I have already. Notice how I'm using my hand to wipe the surface as I go. I'm not just wiping away any dust that is there, but I'm also feeling the surface. I'm looking to see if I can find any sort of bumps or breaks or anywhere that the surface simply feels different than where I have already sanded. Your hand can feel so much more than your eyes are able to see. As I used my hand, I could feel there were several little tiny bumps in the surface that I needed to get rid of. If you continue to paint over those bumps, they're just going to get larger and larger. So sanding in between each of your layers is a really good idea. I switch over to 320 grit on my orbital sander because A, I don't want to break through the finish, so I use a high grit. B, it's more rigid than the flexible sandpaper that I've been using. With flexible sandpaper, I would have simply gone over the bump and around the bump and likely broke through the finish. This allows me to really knock down those little bumps and create a very smooth surface. Please also know I do have the wet dry vac turned on, therefore there's no dust emissions in the air. Feel free to use a respirator if you feel like you need to. For this small little task, I didn't feel like I needed to. Respirators are never a bad idea though. Now I go back with my mostly dry cloth and I'm just wiping down the surface, getting rid of any dust that is existing on there. And now for another coat of primer. Once again, I'm going to be sure to dab into the areas that need a little extra attention and help, pushing the primer into those crevices that are still existing. Then you just smooth them out. Continue to add the primer all over the surface until complete coverage. The priming and then sanding process is completed 3 times for full coverage and full smoothness. Note that I was always very careful to have a very light hand with my 320 or 220 grit sandpaper going over the areas that had those fibers. What I am left with is an ultra smooth, fiber-free surface that is completely ready to paint. On to the next phase.